In April 2004, Mitsubishi Motors' biggest shareholder walked away. No warning, no bailout plan, nothing. Within a year, 3 companies that owned 0% of Mitsubishi Motors stock stepped in and rescued it anyway. They're not legally connected. They don't share a parent company. And they've been doing this to each other since 1954.
This is what's called a Keiretsu, and Western business coverage tends to flatten it into something like Japanese companies that are friendly with each other. That's not wrong, but it undersells what's actually happening. A Keiretsu isn't a legal entity. There's no parent company, no merger, often no majority ownership at all. It's closer to a standing alliance between companies that grew out of the same pre-war conglomerate, or banded together after the war, and never really stopped acting like family. The word itself literally means series or linkage, not company or group, and that's deliberate. English business writing borrows the term conglomerate almost reflexively, but a conglomerate is one company that owns many businesses. A Keiretsu is closer to the opposite. Many separately owned businesses that act, when it counts, like one.
To understand why, you have to go back to 1945. After the war, the American occupation broke up Japan's giant pre-war conglomerates, the zaibatsu, including Mitsubishi, Mitsui, and Sumitomo. On paper, this worked. The holding companies were dissolved, crossovership was banned. The families that controlled them lost formal power. But the people didn't disappear, and neither did the relationships. Within a few years, the former Mitsubishi companies started finding each other again, not as one legal company, but as a loose network of firms that still did business together, still trusted each other, and still, when it mattered, showed up for each other. And Mitsubishi wasn't alone in doing this. Sumitomo's core companies formed their own President's Council, the Hakusukai, in 1951. Mitsui's version, the Nimokukai, followed in 1961. 2 more industrial groups that formed after the war rather than descending from a pre-war zaibatsu, the Sanwa Group and the Daiichi Kongyo Group, built their own equivalents too, with Sanwa's Sansuikai forming in 1967. 6 different councils, 6 different names, built across 2 decades, all around the same idea. The chairman and presidents of a group's core companies, meeting privately on a fixed schedule, with no legal authority over each other at all.
Here's where you need to look at how this was actually described in Japan, not the simplified version. Japanese business media describes the founding of Mitsubishi's President's Council, the Kinyokai, or Friday Club, directly. It was formed in 1954 by the group's core companies specifically so they would never again be caught unprepared the way they had been a couple of years earlier.
That earlier scare is the real origin story. In the early 1950s, a corporate raider quietly bought up more than 20% of the shares in a Mitsubishi-affiliated real estate company, the predecessor of what's now Mitsubishi Estate, one of the biggest landowners in central Tokyo. Mitsubishi Bank organized the group's companies to buy the stock back before the raider could take control. They won, but it was close enough to be alarming. A year later, the core companies formalized what had been an improvised rescue into a standing institution, a private, invitation-only meeting of the chairman and presidents of roughly 24 Mitsubishi companies. Today, it's still led by what's known as the Big Three: Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, Mitsubishi Corporation, and Mitsubishi UFJ Bank.
Put a number on that today, and the Big Three alone are enormous. Mitsubishi Corporation, the group's trading house, reported roughly 19 trillion yen in revenue for the 2024 fiscal year. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, the manufacturer, brought in a little over 5 trillion yen. Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group, the bank, was sitting on close to 40 trillion yen in total assets. None of that scale comes from one balance sheet. It comes from 3 separately listed, separately run companies that happened to still show up for the same private dinner. Fast forward exactly 50 years. In April 2004, investigators found that Mitsubishi Motors had been concealing defects on a scale even larger than a previous scandal from 2000, itself a cover-up spanning 18 separate defect categories and roughly 690,000 vehicles, some going back over 20 years. This time, roughly 740,000 vehicles. Daimler Chrysler, which had taken a 34% controlling stake in Mitsubishi Motors back in 2000, cut off financial support within days. The company's president resigned before his term was even up. By any normal market logic, this should have been the end. Instead, by January 2005, Mitsubishi Motors turned to exactly the three companies you'd expect: Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, Mitsubishi Corporation, and the bank now known as Mitsubishi UFJ. They requested additional capital. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries' stake alone grew past 15%, enough to formally bring Mitsubishi Motors onto its books as an affiliated company. None of these three companies were under any legal obligation to do this. There was no merger agreement forcing their hand. The negotiations happened almost entirely behind closed doors, worked out through the same private channel, rather than announced as a public rescue package the way Daimler Chrysler's exit had been. What moved was the same body that had formed exactly 50 years earlier for exactly this kind of moment: the Friday Club.
This is the actual function of a Keiretsu that gets lost in translation. It behaves like an insurance policy that never shows up on a balance sheet. Cross-shareholdings between group companies are usually small individually, sometimes just a few percent each, deliberately structured so no single outside investor could ever buy up a controlling stake, the way that Raider tried to in the 1950s. But when a member company is in genuine trouble, that same network can move real capital fast, coordinated informally through a private dinner meeting rather than a public bailout announcement. It's not charity. Keeping Mitsubishi attached to a struggling car company protects the brand value of every other company still using that name and that three-diamond logo.
None of this runs on charity, even in ordinary times. A Keiretsu's general trading company, in Mitsubishi's case, Mitsubishi Corporation, handles an outsized share of the group's raw material sourcing and overseas deal-making, acting almost like a shared purchasing and logistics department for companies that are otherwise fully independent. The group's main bank plays a similar role for financing. Member companies raise capital together, sit on each other's boards in small numbers, and route a disproportionate share of ordinary business, insurance contracts, real estate leases, supply orders, toward each other before looking outside the group. Executives move between member companies too, seconded for a few years at a time, carrying relationships and unwritten obligations with them. Mitsubishi Estate, the same real estate company that survived the 1950s takeover attempt, still owns a large share of the Marunouchi business district in central Tokyo, where several of the group's other core companies keep their headquarters, paying rent to a landlord that is, in every legal sense, a completely separate business. None of it is exclusive. Mitsubishi companies do plenty of business with outsiders, but when a choice is close, the Keiretsu Chai tends to be the tiebreaker.
And Mitsubishi's Keiretsu isn't the only one that has done this. 3 decades before the Mitsubishi Motors rescue, in 1974, Toyo Kogyo, the company known today as Mazda, ran into its own near-fatal crisis. Its rotary engine prices soaring. Inventory piled up past 200,000 unsold cars. Toyo Kogyo's main bank, Sumitomo Bank, the core financial institution of an entirely different Keiretsu, stepped in. In January 1975, Sumitomo Bank placed its own executives on Toyo Kogyo's board and created an internal division inside the bank whose only job was managing the automaker back to health. It worked. 2 different Keiretsus, 2 different decades, 2 different automakers on the edge of collapse, rescued the same way. Not by a government bailout, not by a foreign buyer, but by the main bank or core companies of their own group, quietly taking control long enough to fix the problem.
The Keiretsu system isn't what it was at its post-war peak. Japan's wave of megabank mergers in the late 1990s and 2000s scrambled several of the 6 historic groups together, weakening the neat lines that used to separate them. This wasn't only an internal story either. By the late 1980s, American trade negotiators had singled out Keiretsu relationships by name. During the Structural Impediments Initiative talks that ran from 1989 into 1990, U.S. officials argued that cross-shareholding and the informal preference for doing business inside the group amounted to a real barrier keeping foreign companies out of the Japanese market, and Japan agreed to tighten antitrust enforcement around exactly these kinds of arrangements. Domestic reformers made a similar case decades later. Cross-shareholdings among Tokyo Stock Exchange-listed companies, which had made up something like 1/5 of the entire market by value at their late 1980s peak, fell dramatically over the following decades as Japan's corporate governance code pushed listed companies to justify or unwind their policy holdings. Some of that pressure has clearly worked, but the Mitsubishi Motors rescue happened in 2005, well after Keiretsu were already being declared obsolete by outside observers, and the Friday Club itself is still meeting today, 70 years after that first stock buyback scare.
A Keiretsu was never really about ownership. It was about a promise made after almost losing something, formalized into a standing habit of showing up for each other. Sanyo didn't have one of these behind it when its battery division needed a buyer. Mitsubishi Motors did. That difference, more than any factory or patent, is what a Keiretsu actually is. Outsiders keep waiting for Keiretsus to finally disappear, the way trade negotiators and governance reformers have predicted for 3 decades running. They haven't. They've just gotten quieter about it. A company club born from a stock raid in the 1950s, still active enough to bail out a scandal-ridden automaker 50 years later. That's the hidden architecture behind half the Japanese company names you already know. Subscribe for the next one.